Hello everybody and welcome back to the free online woodworking school where we aim to take your woodworking skills to the next level. In today's video, we're going to get this little beauty flushed off and fitted within the carcass. Let's get going. Okay, so for flushing this off, I cannot stress this enough. Sharp plane, preferably with a very shallow camber on it because you can use that to your advantage when squaring up the sides and localizing the shavings in certain areas, but make sure it's sharp. Above all things, you don't want to be getting tear out on this now. And so I've got this clamped in the tail vise at the moment, and whichever method you choose to clamp this doesn't really matter. Just make sure you've got access to the top of the frame in its entirety. And you'll also notice that I've tightened the dogs above one of the stiles. If I did it above one of the rails like that, because these aren't glued in here, that may start causing those to bow and probably cause stress on the joints. So best to do it around the areas where it's strongest. And with this lovely panel, we are going to put just a little bit of paper over it. She'll do it that way up. Paper, card, whatever, as long as it sits below the surface. And this is a trick that I learned from a David Charlesworth DVD. I can't remember which one, but it doesn't really matter. They're all brilliant. And it's to ensure you plane the grain in the correct direction at all times. And so if we look at the side of the door closest to us, you can see that the grain is kind of going off at an angle towards here, sort of scooping up like that. And this is a very easy way to read which way you need to plane it because grain is very much like fur. I've covered this in a previous video with how to remove tear out with a hand plane. It's essential that you're able to read this side grain because it will really reduce some headaches for you. And so, because we have to plane it in this direction, on the bit of paper here, we are going to do an arrow that way. Then we move around to the top, so that's kind of sloping off that way towards the back. And so we're going to do an arrow that way. And so on and so forth for the two remaining sides. With any luck, it goes around in a circle. However, we're not going to in this case. And there you go, that's what we've been left with. Obviously, there's no point drawing these arrows on the frame because as soon as you take the shaving, it disappears. And you can do it on the sides, but it's just not as convenient to see, especially on the back edge here. And so with that, we've got quite an obvious route we need to take here. We need to start in this top corner, go down, turn that corner, and then go this way, and then start up here, and go that way as well. So we're kind of fortunate in this instance. And so on here, I'll just write front, and then we'll do A, B, C, D, and then we can do exactly the same for the back using the opposite side of the piece of paper. And if the direction of the grain isn't too obvious on the sides, then you're probably just gonna have to take a leap of faith, try playing it one way and see what happens. If it works, cool, stick with that. If you get tear out, unfortunate. But I mean, saying that, this isn't something that gives you guaranteed success every single time. Sometimes you read that grain on the edge and you plane it with full confidence, you're gonna get a lovely shaving out of it, and you hit tear out, and it turns out you have to actually go the other way. But as a rule of thumb, that's the way you need to be planing. And again, if you want sort of more information on that, then the previous video, how to reduce tear out with a hand plane, is the one to go to. So I'll just chip off the glue where I can first. No point planing over that. And let's go for it. So I'm just advancing the plane blade as I'm pushing it, waiting to see that first shaving pop out. It's a lot better if you have a piece of paper that's actually flat. So that's the back sorted. Pop it down on here and we'll flip round to the front. And you might notice when I'm going around these corners, instead of just making it a hard 90-degree turn like that, I'm still referencing the back of the plane off the original rail. So we'll go like that, and then we'll transfer it across like that while keeping it resting here. That prevents you from accidentally dipping off this edge too much and always references off the piece that you've just planed. So it's not actually cutting when I do that, but we've just got to be patient with it and it will eventually get down to the level here because I can see there's still markings and roughness there. Same again on these bottom bits. Go down the stile, across the rail while still referencing on the stile. Right, so the next job is going to be to get it upright in the vise and we'll start flushing off these joints. Okay, and then for this, we obviously want to be reading the side grain again to ensure we're planing in the right direction. So at the moment, it's sloping up this way, which means I need to plane that way. And obviously, because we're contending with end grain here, you don't want to be planing straight off the edge either, because we might end up causing a bit of breakout on the back edge here. A couple of ways to stop that. Firstly, you could plane all the way along this long grain and stop as soon as you hit the end grain, and then just finish off by coming in the opposite direction. Or alternatively, clamp a supporting block at the back edge here, and then you should be able to plane all the way off with the end grain fully supported, and you won't get any breakout. I'm probably going to go for the former option and go all the way along until I hit the end grain and then just come in from the other way. I've got such a sharp plane though, I have no doubt I should be able to plane against the grain here and not get any tear out, but we will see. I am seeing though this bit of end grain is sitting quite proud of the long grain, so we need to finish that off first, or else I won't even be able to do my through shavings. And it's about steady and controlled shavings at this point. Plenty of pressure on top of the plane to ensure it doesn't chatter over the end grain, although it shouldn't do if it's sharp. And make sure you're taking off a nice, even, consistent shaving. There we go. So we've taken off just enough to flush off the joints and nothing more, because we don't want to make this door wobbly. Lovely. Okay, so that's just fitting in there now. About 0.5 millimeter top to bottom. I don't think it's going to quite fit in widthways though. Nope, so we need to take a tiny bit off the sides. And these sides still require a bit of cleanup anyway, because we've still got the rough milling marks from the planer and thicknesser. Just to be safe, I'm only going to take off 1 or 2 shavings from either side and then check the fit again. Okay, so still a few lumps and bumps in that. Let's do another one. There's still a little dip here, so let's just plane them out. Sorted. That's that side perfectly flat now. Same again on the other. Got a nice little dent here I need to steam out later. And so now with any luck, go on. Yes. Lovely. So that just about fits in there. And so, in my humble opinion, that looks very, very good. There's no gaps around in the door and it's a nice snug fit within the carcass. However, this is the problem. The reason for this is the hinges we're going to be using are quite cheap. And don't worry, we're going to be dressing them up. We're going to be polishing them to make them accurate and also look 10 times more expensive than they actually are. But with these hinges, there's one thing you can't actually fix, which is the fact that the two halves of it, I suppose, don't close completely flush with one another. There's always a gap of about 0.5 millimeter between them when the leaves sit parallel with one another. And so that means if you install the leaves to be flush with the outside of the door and the inside of the carcass, which is what we're going to be doing, you will end up with a 0.5 millimeter gap down this side of the door, maybe a little bit more. And that will look a little bit off balance if you've got a gap here and then no gap on the remaining 3 sides. So what we actually need to do in this case is plane an intentional shadow gap on those remaining 3 sides to make that gap look nice and consistent. And I always like using pieces of veneer to shim out the door, because this is about 0.6 millimeters thick and is a great way to just space out all 4 edges to ensure that door is floating in there perfectly with a nice 0.5, 0.6 millimeter shadow gap surrounding it. So to start with, I'm just going to go around the door and see if I can fit this in any of those little gaps. It's just about going in up there, nothing here, nothing there, and nothing down the bottom. So we've just got a little bit here and a little bit here. And so we're going to work on getting these 2 gaps consistent first. I'm going to start off by taking a little bit of material off up here on the door and then making sure to do some through shavings to ensure that side ends up perfectly flat. And then we'll do the same on the top. I've got to take a little bit more off this side and then do some through shavings on it to ensure that stays flat. And hopefully we'll be able to get a piece of veneer here, here, here and here. So there you go, 2 bits shimmed in the side. Now let's begin working on the top. I'll just double check that that's still the same. Yep, still a gap there, still nothing there. And there you go, top and bottom done, as well as the sides. Lovely fit. And by the way, don't worry if you don't have access to veneer to do this. Literally anything that's about 0.5 millimeter thick will be absolutely fine. You could even fold up pieces of paper multiple times to make up this thickness. Just make sure the shims are all folded exactly the same amount of times. Right, so now we'll move on to the opposite 2 edges. And it's basically exactly what you'd expect here. Just got to keep taking shavings off those other 2 sides until the shims fit. We will just quickly check it again to ensure I can't fit any veneer in any of the places, which absolutely not. That's really snug at the moment. So yeah, just got to plane them down a bit and get these fitted. And when you're fitting these shims, even if you're trying to do the opposite side, just make sure you can still get those top ones in, because that will indicate if you've accidentally twisted the door. You know, I could take off too much here and I'd be able to get both of them in either side, but then I wouldn't be able to get the top in if it was twisted. So just do it systematically and make sure you're always able to get the previous shims in place, which there we go. So that side's now done. Just got to do the bottom now. Right, and there you go. That is how you flush off the door and fit it within the carcass. The key to this, sharp tools. I cannot emphasize that enough. That process was so enjoyable because I took 5 minutes this morning getting this thing razor sharp. Perfect camber on it, really sharp edge, and it makes the process so much easier. Look at those lovely shavings. And so if you want a refresher on how to sharpen a plane blade to that standard, then go and watch the previous lessons in the free online school. That will be linked in the supporting resources below. Now for the next part, we're obviously going to be hinging this, and there's a video that I need you to watch between this video and the next one, and it's to do with tuning the hinges up. That includes filing the sides, flattening off the tops, polishing them to make them look, like I said earlier, 10 times more expensive than they actually are. They need to be at this standard if you were to fit them accurately. You can't just go to your local DIY merchant down the road, pick it off the shelf and then hope it goes in there. You need to do some work to them. And so that video will be linked in the supporting resources below as well. And it will also be listed in the next lesson if you want to watch that before doing the hinge tuning. But it is going to be essential viewing for the next part of the project. So make sure you watch it and make sure you put in the work to get those hinges tuned. And then in the next video, we'll get fitting that door to the carcass. So as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do not forget to press the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and you can move on to the next lesson by clicking the link below. I'll see you there.